I am Stella Gold for those that are tuning in, catching the replay. I'm the founder of My Gold Standard, and I will be your host today. And I have the lovely Ari with us from Viscera Studio. And what I like to start with when entering these conversations, these rich conversations, is to give a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that My Gold Standard is located on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. And we honor the Ohlone people and other indigenous caretakers of these lands and waters, and the elders who lived here before, the indigenous today, and the generations to come. And as guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. And we wish to pay our respects with this land acknowledgement by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. So if you're unfamiliar with two things, so the Land Back Initiative, definitely look that up. And then also, if you're unfamiliar with whose land you are a settler on, I invite you to look on native-land.ca. So very important that we honor the indigenous ancestors here with us today. So yeah, I'm excited to have you, Ari. This has been a conversation that I personally am the more selfishly wanted to have, because I'm an entrepreneur too, and I'm not just like a one business entrepreneur. I feel like I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm very multi-hyphenate. I do a lot of things. I make money in a lot of different ways. Sorry, I looked up because that spider is gravitating towards me. But I'd love for you to start off by introducing yourself, what you do, and tell me a little bit about Viscera Studio.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief because, like you, I do a bunch of different things, and I guess depending on which day of the week, you might get a different answer from me.
Tell it all. That's what we're here for.
So I guess I'll go kind of like chronologically. So I started my entrepreneurial journey with a brick-and-mortar storefront called Viscera. It was also my own brand where we did all American made clothing, jewelry, 3D printed jewelry, apothecary, accessories. Through that, I worked with, I want to say, over 100 different brands. We had a number of different pop-ups. So really that kind of ecosystem approach to building a business. So I did that for about 5 years. Somewhere along the way, people would say, "Who did your creative?" or "Who designed the shop?" And the answer was always me. And so I started taking on sort of freelance design projects here and there. So that was in 2017.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know since 2017. That's so cool.
It's been kind of like simmering in the background for a while.
Yeah.
So I started taking on these like freelance projects. I finished my 5-year lease on the shop at the end of 2019. And so I was right in that phase of like, okay, I'm going to open up a new shop. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, and more people needed design work. People who, didn't have marketing strategies or didn't have websites, like they needed to retool. And so the studio side of my business got really busy once the pandemic came around. And so, kind of in the last 2 years, it's gone from, me being a freelancer to having a studio manager and working with a team of 10 other creatives and kind of expanding the type of work that we do. But Viscera Studio does, all of the creative aspects that you would need for a business. So everything from photography, website design and development, graphics, marketing strategy, brand positioning, all of those things. So it can be more or less like a one-stop shop for your business because, when you're running a business, there's already so many other things you need to juggle. Design doesn't need to be its own other multi-pronged pain in the butt.
Yeah, I feel that so much.
Yeah. It's just it can be such a powerful tool, but it also can be incredibly overwhelming if you haven't had the experience of working figuring out how design fits into your business and how to actually make it impactful for you.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my like professional story as an entrepreneur. But I also am a muralist, and so I do, yeah, large scale murals when I'm not designing or running the product business.
I saw that you won the,
Yeah.
I was like, yo, I'm so voting for you. And then
Thank you.
Sean asks me, he goes, did you vote for Ari? And I was like, yeah, I did last week. Did you? And he's like, no, I'm doing it now.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see my design on a bottle of bourbon. So I'll
Yes,
share the details with you when it comes out. But
please
yeah, it's been nice
do.
to get to do like my own art and not just creative for other people.
I think that like what culturally people can, and I have definitely been there too. When you think of like an entrepreneur, you just think of like the CEO. And like that's a part of it. But like to me, being an entrepreneur, I almost see as synonymous as being an artist. Like I really, really do.
Yeah, I
And
think that's so
I
true. Yeah,
yeah,
every artist is an entrepreneur.
absolutely. And I'm also curious. I have like a zillion questions like brewing into my mind right now, but I'm also curious, like when you shifted into the design space versus having, the brick and mortar shop, and did that shift, was there a big demand during the pandemic because of, the great resignation and people like myself starting their own businesses and quitting their jobs? I have so many clients that have come to me saying like, I tell me how to quit my job so I can do my own thing. So I have a lot
Yeah.
of entrepreneurs that are new because of
Hmm.
the pandemic. So curious to know your personal experience there.
Yeah, a lot of our clients were folks who either got laid off or realized, with this short life that we have, this is not how I want to be spending my time. So we do have kind of a range of, uh, you know, brand new, like fledgling entrepreneurs all the way to like, more scaled folks who are a little more legacy or like larger organizations, but it's always
Yeah.
the new entrepreneurs that have my heart because I know how exciting that time can be, and I know how critical getting the right type of help is in that moment. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, a ton of people left their jobs and started businesses and work with us. And I think I've been saying this for a while because I've now been self-employed for 8 years, something like that.
Wow.
And so people would always tell me like, wow, that's so risky. You're so brave. And, I usually would be like, actually, I'm not like your company, not to be like super glib, but like your company doesn't love you. You aren't a family. They will like lay you off anytime. And so
Yeah.
like the reality is all of it's risky and you just need to figure out what's the right mix for you.
Yeah. My money mentor, um, she had always said to me, and to like, this is just what she definitely preaches, and what she does is, you are your own economy. And, that really sat with me because, and I'll share a personal story, and it is, Sean is included in that personal story, but when he had lost his job at the beginning of the pandemic, he lost his entire income, literally in the snap of a finger. And it really shook us. And that you are your own economy struck a chord within me again. And I was like, I need to make sure I diversify the way that I make income, not just like my, 401k or my investment portfolio, but literally how I make income. And that there is a way to do it where you can avoid burnout or overextending yourself, and working smarter, not harder. I am curious, have you worked for a company or with a company before, like doing the
Mhm.
9 to 5?
Yeah. So before I was an entrepreneur, I worked for the government as a project manager doing commercial interiors. So I did that pretty securely for like 5 years while, I had finished
Wow.
undergrad, started that, got into grad school and like still like worked full time. I had bought a house also. Like I had all of the like things
You
that
had
you're
the
supposed to
things.
do, like degree, house, job, all of that stuff. And I still was not really contented in any way. And
Hmm.
so I think, I had a little bit of a taste of that security that people really strive for. And it's something I, at the time really wanted, but ultimately left me kind of uh, feeling empty or like not satisfied in my work.
Yeah. I will say with coming from that space too, I had always, I feel like the first like 4 or 5 years of my life, I was doing multiple jobs. But I
Mm.
was doing that to survive, like not because I was being savvy and diversifying my income streams, but I was like, I need to survive in New York City. I got bills to pay, and I just don't want to, rely on my parents, or like I want to be financially sovereign. That's like where I
Hmm.
was coming at. And I was, and it was great. And I was able to save with my 3 jobs, and they made up one full-time job, the amount of stuff that I did. And because I did those multiple jobs, even though I transitioned to a full-time like 9 to 5 job, and I was doing something that I really, really loved. Like I loved my job. I just didn't love the company. And even though I loved my job, it was still like I felt so unfulfilled because someone else was in charge of my economic well-being. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that you brought up that people were saying, like, oh, you're being so risky. And one thing comes to mind is I think it's so incredibly risky to put, like, when you think about investing, you don't put your eggs in one stock, right? You don't put it in one
Hmm.
basket. The same thing comes with income. Why? That's risky, putting it in one place.
Yeah.
And I did not know you worked for the government, but I have so many people that come to me and say, I cannot leave my government job because I get a pension. I get really great benefits. I have incredible health insurance. And I just think that is so badass that you left that job, number one, and number two, and took that leap. I'm not going to call it a risk, but you took that leap. And I'm pretty sure you're making way more money than you would have if you stayed at that government job, or will be, wherever you're at in your financial life.
Yeah, I think more than anything, I'm, money wise, like, yeah, I'm probably better off than I was at that job. But
Mhm.
I think more so it's like the fulfillment. Uh,
Yeah.
the part of the thing that was unfulfilling for me was like, um, I don't know, it just felt like you were, I mean, this is the point of a government, right? You're just a cog in a very big machine. And so
Yeah.
me being like my Capricorn self, I'd always be like leading new initiatives or trying to do, X, Y, or Z within my department. And
Oof. You made
I
a lot
got
of
some of them
spreadsheets,
done.
right?
I actually I got and it was so ridiculous. The government's so behind that I was like, in 2012 suggesting that maybe we don't keep our architectural files in paper, like maybe we scan them and put them on the cloud. And I had somebody in like from headquarters, meaning like DC, say like cloud. I didn't see any clouds. Like they literally made a weather joke at me suggesting this. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, this is never going to quite be for me. And it earned
Hmm.
me the nickname Claudia in my office. And so they were always like, Ari never wants us to print anything on paper. Or, it was a whole
Oh my
youngster,
gosh.
what are you doing?
You're like, I'm saving us time and resources and
I'm the one
trees.
who's going to have to be here in the future.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
Claudia, that's just rude,
It was it
honestly.
was
That's
pretty wild. It was
that's
pretty
rude.
wild.
Well, I would love to transition to, your upbringing and also your path like, I'm curious to know if entrepreneurship was a path that your ancestors took as well. I have a lot of financial related work from my ancestors, which I just found out was in the last couple months. Had no idea. I thought I was like the black sheep that was just really into wealth and money and getting financially, literate and understanding those things. And when I realized that, it kind of blew my mind, and how it really is within us. So I'm curious if that's the case for you too.
Yeah, I didn't realize this until I had already started the shop, but my grandmother on my the Japanese side of my family, they had a little like convenience slash grocery store on Hotel Street in Hawaii, in town in Hawaii. And that's, yeah, something that I think it must have skipped a generation because none of my mom and my uncles, like none of them went the entrepreneurial route. But I think part of it was probably that they saw how hard their mom had to work to keep the shop going.
Mm.
But it's definitely, I feel like a certain obvious kinship with that and her ability to like, she was the one who had to go out and chase their debts. Like when people ran up a tab, she was the one who had to go handle it. And she's this little, like 4'10" Japanese Okinawan lady. And so I like
She
really
was not
love that.
messing around.
She was not the one to play with. She eventually later on like was a butcher at the grocery store. Like she was not the one to play with. And, my grandmother died when my mom was like 19, and my grandfather died when my mom was like 9. So I never actually got to meet my
Wow.
grandparents.
Yeah.
But I do really like love hearing some of those stories. And my grandfather on my Japanese side too, he worked as like a salesman for Sears for many years. So I like to think that I got maybe some of that skill passed down to me.
Absolutely. I so believe that. And oh my gosh, I'm just resonating with that so well, because I've been diving into a lot of, yeah, just doing like research on my ancestors and doing that work. And I met with just to, I guess, they're called a katuran, which is a Filipina priestess, but in, I guess the best way to have it relatable to everybody that's watching this is as a shaman or a medium. And that is where she invited me to really dig up, who is in my lineage, what they were doing, what their skills were, what their interests were. And they were the same as me. Like one was a writer. That was my first love. I was a journalist, and that was supposed to be my 100% focus. And I'm glad that I have that skill and can, do storytelling in that way. I also love film and video editing, and I didn't know that I have people that are into cinema in my lineage. And the money part was like the other missing piece. And it just really shocked me. I was like, whoa, like, so I really do believe that we really carry them with us, and that they are with us. Is your shop, is the family shop still open, or is that something that closed?
No, no. I think it closed like probably before my mom was even born, and it was actually one of
Mm,
those things that caused some family strife because
ugh,
their parents who owned it, died, and they had to figure out how to split it up, and they ended up selling the store. But I think about it today because my grandparents actually most of my family has been pretty poor for a very long time,
mhm.
and to think about it now, just the space that they had on Hotel Street in Hawaii would have been worth millions today.
Wow.
But family squabbles will run you dry, I guess.
No, that is definitely very real. I'm kind of going through that right now with my family, but in the
Mm.
Philippines. No, nothing squabbling yet, just a lot of avoidance, but I'm
Mm.
anticipating some squabbling.
Oh.
Um, Speaking of, I'm curious if you would ever open up a space again, because you currently don't have one yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I do. It's funny because I think, it's been a couple of years now, a lot of time at home, which is the thing that I always wanted because I worked so many hours at the shop and was always worried about it. Like it was always
Yeah.
on my mind. Um, and so having these 2 years of not having that, I realized how much I miss sort of the serendipity of people that I would meet, or just like the timing stuff that works out somehow.
Mm.
That was always really exciting and I think fun for me. So now having, like an office and it's the same people there, like you miss a little bit of that like chance meeting of like interesting people, and you just don't get to mix with as many. Like I got to meet so many people who are very different from me, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I often have those sort of opportunities now.
Mm.
So I'm thinking, maybe 2023 a shop may come back. I would do it a little bit differently than I did the first time because I definitely worked. It was my baby, right? So I worked super hard and put in maybe too many hours. So
Mm-hmm.
if I were to do it again, I would definitely hire more staff and trim down sort of the inventory that I offered. And there's things that I now see like in terms of operations and systems that I could have done better. So
Yeah.
it's not off the table, but it's also not something I'm actively pursuing this year.
Yeah. I think that, everything that we do, we're always gonna take away like different reflections or learnings or unlearnings about, oh, like, here's where I would have done it differently, or here's
Mhm.
where I could have made some shifts. I think it's really cool that, you had this place also, like you needed to have the space to start your second business as a
Yeah.
design studio. Like that's where you found your customers, or more so they found
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Wow. All right, let's see. I'm wondering like what entrepreneurship is to you, because everyone has their own definition of what that word means. And I have some, I'm sure my definition might be different than yours. And I'm always curious to know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think entrepreneurship is a few things to me. One is it's being able to spot opportunities.
Mm,
That's a key portion of it, right? Like if you're not actually solving a problem for someone, you're not really it's not going to work, right? Like you need to be solving someone's problem. So being able to spot opportunities, I think, is one major component. I think another is being of service, like keeping that mindset, because some people do have great ideas and have the ability to spot opportunities, but um, approach it in a sort of win-loss way.
mm.
Shout out Elon Musk, right? Like it's not, um,
Oh my gosh.
it's not
Cringe.
sustainable in that way. I know somebody told me recently that they've been calling him Space Karen, which I'm here for, but
He's totally a space Karen.
I thought that was so funny.
Like,
Um,
oh my goodness.
yeah. So I mean, I think it's those things, right? Being able to spot opportunity, being able to be in service, and then I guess you know being able to know your value, like that's another portion of it.
Mm,
Because I find that a lot of times people become their own employees rather than entrepreneurs. And that I've done it myself, right? Where you're just kind of a bad boss to yourself and like making yourself work too hard and not paying yourself enough, like all of the things that you would complain about a boss, we sometimes do to ourselves. And so I think that's another part of it, knowing your value and knowing how to keep yourself out of the like employee space.
yeah, I think that I love your definition of entrepreneurship, because I don't even know what I don't even know how to answer that for myself now with all the things that you said. I was like, yeah, like, because like for me, entrepreneurship is just whatever you make of it. Like anyone to me can be an entrepreneur. Like, however, so anyone can be an entrepreneur, but I don't, I do think it takes certain qualities, certain skills that can all be built. You know, you don't have to
Hmm.
have them to stay an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's the staying
Yeah.
power that makes you an entrepreneur long term. Because yeah, like you said, anyone can kind of try it, and it's at that point where you need to decide that you can learn new things, or you're not going to be able to stay an entrepreneur for very long.
Yeah. And I think that that last part that you touched base on is so true. Like I definitely struggle with that myself. Like I honestly feel like my first year being a business owner was me just like detoxing from the startup job. It was like, how do I just like not, how do I survive? How do I make this business
Hmm.
survive? Like I wasn't even thinking about like scaling or growing. I just was like, how do I just make money?
Yeah.
Even if it's like $1, like how can am I
Hmm.
able to do that? How can I do that? And how do I get seen? How do I get my business out there? How do people know about it? Like I was just really in survival mode, which I think um I feel very privileged because Sean did get a really great opportunity where, and I saved a shit ton of money so I could quit my job to do this. But it is knowing your value because I took a bet on myself. I was like, all right, I'm going to bet on myself, see what happens. And in my first year, I made a profit. It was like really, and it's because this is my second business. This is not my first business.
Mm-hmm.
My first business was a hot ass mess. In the end, it was all fine and dandy, but I went into debt. I had like $21,000 of credit card debt, high interest, made a lot of business mistakes that I could have avoided, but I didn't know. So, now having this as my second business, I was able to really prepare. I also did not prepare financially. That was another thing.
Mm-hmm.
So this time, I had my ducks in a row, and I gave myself a year. I was like, just for me, my goal was to break even. And at the last day of the year, I was able to flip a little bit of a profit. And I shifted from, okay, now I know that, it's kind of a weird feeling of, okay, now I know that I can start a business and run a business. And now year two is all about staying in business.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I was very hungry for that. I was like, I know I can do it now. Let's go bigger. Let's bet even more.
Yeah.
And I started to slip back into the employee, like seeing myself as just an employee and not as like a CEO and not as a person that could have a business that could lead a team. That's why I'm very inspired by you because you are investing in a team and they're investing in the studio itself. And I just think that's
Mm-hmm.
really, and they're investing in your clients. It's like a whole, like I'm thinking about this visual of like biodynamic farming. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I'm a farming nerd. It's like a consistent for a flow of reciprocity. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm also curious to know, like, was this the first time that you've brought a team together, and like how has that process been like?
For the shop, I definitely had hired like part-time people. At one point, I hired a store manager, and I think the unrealistic expectation that I had that I now kind of see differently is that I expected them to replace me. Like I expected them to perform for my business as like work as hard as I would. And no one
Mm.
ever is going to do that. Like that's an unrealistic expectation. And I had some really fantastic employees along the way, some who are still friends, and I'm still like references for them and everything. But I don't think at that point I was really thinking about, the brick and mortar shop as something, um, as like a concerted team. It was sort of like hodgepodge, replacing people, like replacing parts of my work and
Mm-hmm.
teaching other people how to do certain slivers of it rather than hiring people with more of that experience to bring that to the table. And so now I
Mm.
think, and part of it is probably ego too, right? I want to be the one who knows how to do everything the best. Whereas now with more experience, like a little more wisdom, I can see that I'm better off when I bring in people to my team who are better than me at a lot of things. I want to be the worst performer in our company. If I do that, that means I'm doing my job of hiring well. And I think that that's true. Like so many of the people that
Yeah.
I work with are incredibly talented and they have the wealth of experience and we can kind of trade skills in some ways and like learn from one another.
I think that well, first and foremost, are you into human design? Like, do you know what your human design is?
Is this like what is the name of it? Like disc assessment type things?
It's so there's so much that goes into it, but it's if you've ever been on like Instagram and you're like, this is what a manifester is, this is a generator, this is a projector. It's kind of similar to astrology, but I
Hmm.
feel like it teaches you more about God, it teaches you so much, but I have been using it as a tool for just me as a CEO and as an entrepreneur, and it's as a person, just a human in business. And you're giving me manifester vibes for sure, because that's what I am. I'm always like, go, go, go. I definitely have an ego of like wanting to be the best at everything. And I will always justify like, oh, why pay someone else if I can just do it myself and I do a good job? Maybe I'm not doing the best job, but I do a good enough job where I tend to stay very like bootstrappy. And I'm
Mm,
realizing that, you know, in order to have a business that thrives and is sustainable, you do have to surrender to your team
yeah.
or to a team, whether you have one or not. And that leads me into my next question. I do want to find out your human design if you're open to it.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it.
If you have your birth date, I will send you everything.
Hmm.
Um, why do you think, because I really wanted to bring you here for this call, because it is my opinion that entrepreneurship is a tool for economic liberation. And I feel like it is a tool that's vital to every single person that, I mean, I can't speak for everywhere else in the world, but definitely in America, um, because it's the way that we can, right, create our own economy and defy the status quo. Like I do believe that for me, how I define entrepreneurship as a tool is that. And there's a lot of people in culture that says like, oh, not everyone can be an entrepreneur, like not everyone can run a business. And I really like to strip down entrepreneur as just a person that brings something, that makes something out of nothing and is able to
Hmm.
do a monetary exchange on that, or even an alternative currency exchange. So whether that's time, energy, money could be part of it, you know, however you want to define currency in your life. But that's how I view as being an entrepreneur, because there's so many people that have their 9 to 5 fund there. It's like my work wife says, that's have your 9 to 5 fund your 5 to 9. I'm like, I don't want to be working that long.
Yeah.
But
It's too many hours.
I get what she's saying. She's like, your full-time job can be the first investor into your life as an entrepreneur. So I'm curious to know, like, do you really feel like it is a tool for economic liberation? And yeah, what are your feelings on that?
I mean, I think it's a one of the best tools that we have because I guess what I would say is it's not like a cure-all, right, for inequities or
No. Yeah.
other oppressive systems, but I think it's one that can help us to be less vulnerable. Because that's often
Mm.
what power requires, right? Like vulnerability. And so being able to have a certain level of self-determinance in how you feed, shelter, like meet, Maslow's like basic, like lower level of needs, how you
Mhm.
meet those things, whether you have resources left over after meeting those needs determines how much you can enact some sort of power on the system that you're in. So if
Mm.
you're working, a 9 to 5 where you make minimum wage and you're really just scraping things together, really on that edge all the time, that's unfortunately like what power wants, right? They want you to be too tired to be able to show up to a city council meeting. They want you to be too tired to remember which day is, election day. Like they don't want you to have the energy to push back. And so I think in a lot of ways, entrepreneurship can at least get you out of that cycle where you're incredibly vulnerable to oppression in that way. Um,
Mhm.
but even within that, like there's still such a huge striation between, people with a ton of money, influence, and power and, small businesses. And there's no way that we ever, like those unicorns aren't real. Right? Like people love to tell the Jeff Bezos, like, start it in his garage. No, he got a $250,000 loan from his parents. And
Mhm.
so, even myself, like being an entrepreneur, I feel like part of the reason why I'm leading the business is partly luck, right? Like anybody that I work with could also run this business. They have the same skill, drive, energy, and passion that I do. I just got a little bit luckier in that I was able to have the capital to start a business. And I went to private schools and went to college and, I went on financial aid, but I still was able to be in those networks. And those are resources that lots of people don't get. And so, a lot of it is just luck, unfortunately. But I do think if you're in a position to be able to be self-sustaining and reliant on yourself, that's one of the major things that we have to push back.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't even imagine a world where we are taught from like such a young age to embrace our curiosities and
Mhm.
creativities and to see them as a valuable contribution to society versus like, oh no, like just stay in your lane and, become a sheep in the herd and, get a good job and live the American
Mhm.
dream, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know, it's just, yeah, I agree with you. I do think it is like one of the strongest tools. Obviously, there are other ways to defy the status quo, right? Um, and to find agency. But yeah, I feel like people are starting to get annoyed by me because I'm just like, hey, do you have a skill that someone would like pay, like any skill? I'm like, just name one skill that someone would pay you to do it for them. And Sean does so many things that I'm like, it's wild how many skills that he has. Like when we were living in New York, our I forget what happened, but he had to change the key to our door, and our landlord wasn't around to do that. So he just like went, bought a thing and replaced the key thing. And our landlord came back and was like, you know how to do this? Like, I was going to have to call someone else to do this. He's like, you can like, people will pay you to do this. And Sean's like, oh, I just watched like a YouTube video on how to do that. And like for
Yeah.
me, I learned video
Yeah.
editing on YouTube. Like I just became
Mhm.
kind of weirdly obsessed with video editing and creating content during the pandemic. And it's a skill that if I really wanted to, like I could monetize. I haven't yet, which is now saying it out loud. I'm like, this is your reminder, but it just, there's so many things that, yeah, God, coming full circle, it really is about valuing, yeah, valuing yourself and what you have to bring to, not even to the table. We don't, it's like fuck the table. It's like what you have to bring, period. Like it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
anywhere, just you as a human being. Wow.
I
Okay.
will say one sort of cautionary thing against that, as somebody who habitually monetizes my hobbies,
Yeah.
is that not everything needs to make you money to provide you value.
Oh, that's
And
huge.
so,
Yes.
it's you can be good enough at something and make money off of it. It doesn't have to be like the thing that brings you ultimate joy, because sometimes money does sort of change your relationship to those things. So anyway, the one cautionary tale.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm definitely, I haven't monetized. The one thing that I monetized for the first time in my life was my artwork. And this was again like something that happened in the pandemic. I just posted a picture of a painting I did, and I was like, I painted this. It's called Sacred Rage. I'm gonna donate everything to like a cause. I think I was doing one to Black Lives Matter and one to native land giving at the time. And I posted it, and in 5 minutes, someone reached out, and it was for $250. They were like, yeah, I'll buy that. I'm like, what? So all of this, my whole life, I could have actually followed my dream to become an artist that gets paid and is well fed, not the starving artist kind of vibe.
Yeah.
But it was something that I just needed to like have that, or not necessarily needed, but it just opened up my world of like, oh, am I limiting myself in some ways? But yeah, it doesn't always have to, the exchange does not always have to be monetary, for sure.
Yeah.
So I have two more questions for you. And I want to talk to like the peoples out there. So if someone is intimidated by the idea of starting a business or being an entrepreneur, what would you say to them?
I say that, well, so I do teach like entrepreneurial classes, and I say this to people all the time where they're probably so tired of me saying it. Don't reinvent the wheel. You can learn so much from other people. There's so many times where people have, I don't know if it's like ego or pride, and I know I have it too, but you don't have to figure out absolutely everything from scratch. Like the fact that you suffered to learn it doesn't make it more valuable. You can learn lessons without suffering. And so I would recommend, if you want to start a business, talk to other people who have done it. Like that was one of the things that I feel grateful that I had the instinct for. When I started the shop, I reached out to 4 or 5 different brick and mortar shop owners, like cold emailed them and said, hey, I'm starting this thing. I really love your shop. Like, can you maybe meet up with me for coffee and like tell me what you wish you knew? All of them were very generous with their time. And I learned so many lessons that I would have had to learn a much more painful way if they weren't so generous with their wisdom and knowledge. Like one of the people I talked to, she said, uh, don't forget about your sales tax. BOE does not play around. And, luckily I like learned that lesson, but you don't know those things until you're in it. And so I would recommend, if you're thinking about a certain business, like go out there and get some information, talk to people. It eventually kind of evens out. Like I was that person who asked for other people's time, and now, I'm the one who people ask often, like, can I pick your brain over coffee? Or, they're starting their own thing. And I feel like if we all just share that knowledge and share that wisdom, we all can be so much better off. And we don't have to be in that scarcity mindset where, I have to hold my secret so tight because someone else is coming to take it. It's like, no, no one will ever do your business the way that you do. And so you can share
Exactly.
your information freely and not worry about that.
Yeah, that is a huge, huge lesson that, I mean, I feel like everyone at some point in their life is going to go through that. Like, you're unique because you're just yourself. You don't have to be, the next Lady Gaga or whatever. You don't have to be the next. I mean, I'd hope that you don't want to be the next Jeff Bezos, but you don't need to be, you don't even need to be on Forbes 30 under 30 list. I think that all of those things are so great to aspire for, and to have dreams that you want to cultivate in being a reality and to work towards that. But yeah, like I feel like I would have never gotten anything done if I was just waiting around for my next like big idea or my next big invention. And it was a very humbling experience for me. So yeah, I mean, is there anything else that you would say to budding entrepreneurs or potential new entrepreneurs, that like things that you wish you knew? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would definitely say start smaller, test with a little bit less risk involved. So, I kind of started, I don't know why I had this like mega instinct to move as fast as possible, but, I went from having a job in, like, I finished grad school, was still working my job in June of 2014, had the
Mhm.
shop open and running by that December. Like it was, I don't know why I did it in such a fast period of time, but I had to like learn how to be a buyer, design the space, like negotiate my lease, build out, do all of these things. And it put a lot more stress on the business up front than I had to. Like I could have started a lot smaller. I've had an online shop since I started. I could have started with an online store, grown my audience, and then gotten into brick and mortar, right? But I felt this certain urgency. And I think that that probably came out of a place of scarcity too, where,
Mm,
I was at the time, Oakland was really ripe for a lot of investment. And the timing wise, I just felt like, oh, I need to get in right now before all the, real estate stock is taken up. Little did we know what would happen today. But,
yeah.
I think it didn't come out of a place that was actually strategic. It was really a lot more, yeah, like ego, like wanting to be able to have a shop and like wanting to move really quickly. But that didn't leave me a lot of wiggle room for figuring things out or having as much fun as I probably could have. So take it slower, like start it smaller if you can.
Yeah. I have you do you know who Paul Jarvis is? Have you heard of
No,
Paul Jarvis? So
I don't think so.
he I forget what his book is called, but he did something. He had a newsletter that he would send out every week. He doesn't do it anymore. But a lot of the things that he had shared was about staying small. He was like, you don't have to be a big business to make, a living and to be a business in of itself. Like you, like he advocates for staying small, actually.
Mm,
And staying small in the concept of like, we are chronic overachievers. Like, we always lust for something more, which I don't
yeah.
think is a bad thing when it's something that's very much in alignment with you and where you want to go.
Hmm.
I think that I tend to be like that as well. Like I just once I complete one chapter of my business, I'm like, okay, on to the next thing. And I just get ideas and I get really creative and I get really excited to a point where I just immediately go into action before I even process or strategize. This
Mm-hmm.
is my manifestor human design coming out, which is why I'm curious if you now I'm like, okay, you need to pause between things that you launch, you need to rest, like you need to take a step back and it's
Hmm.
okay. So I'm curious, yeah, if you've heard of him, but I'll send you that resource and have that linked in this video because I do find his work really unique. Like he does have a unique viewpoint that I never heard before because
Mm,
you just hear about scale, 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 and like make the most
yeah.
amount of money ever. And I'm like, well, you can make the most amount of money ever, even by staying small. Like, I do believe that. And you can be my business mentor always tells me, like, she's rich and rested. And I'm like,
Mm.
rich and rested? What does that even mean? I've never even, like, is that possible? Like, what? And so I
Hmm.
don't know, just trying to think of different ways to embody that. Yeah. Okay. So before we transition to the last question, which will be, I'm curious to know what your first money memory is. It is something that I ask every single person that like I
Hmm.
work with or um, is in the business or financial space or I have here like as a guest. I always like to know like what your first money memory is. But before we get to that, is there anything else that you want to add in the context of like entrepreneurship and business?
I mean, I guess the one other piece of wisdom that I would tell people is go before you're ready. It'll never be the
Mm,
perfect time. It'll never be as good as it could be. And, don't let good be the enemy of done. Like you can, good enough is
yeah.
good enough, and that's fine. And you can always revise. Like I think a lot of times we tend to see things as very like finite, like either it's working or it's not, and I get one shot at this thing, and that's not true. Most things are actually incredibly iterative, and you have chances to rework it and rethink about it and try again. And so yeah, I would just take some pressure off of yourself.
Yeah, I laughed in the beginning because I just thought of if I had waited until I was ready, or if for the perfect time that doesn't exist. I just thought of that meme, or not meme, but like that segment in SpongeBob where they're like 8,000 years later and it's just like
Oh,
SpongeBob like in a like long beard. And I'm
yeah.
like, that's what I would have been like in his little cane. I'm like, I really love that piece of wisdom there. And no, but there wouldn't be art, there wouldn't be music, there wouldn't be business and all the in-betweens of that. I mean, there wouldn't be amazing food if we all waited
Hmm.
until the right time or we were ready.
Hmm.
Oh, such a good piece of wisdom. So yeah. So do tell me what your first money memory is, or just the one that pops up. It doesn't have to be the first one, but the one that just comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll share one of each, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah.
I think the one that is really positive in my mind that I still like kind of relish in today is when I was in fourth grade. I've always been like a pretty artsy kid, was always drawing or like making stuff or sewing or doing whatever. And I figured out that if I use some tracing paper with my little Pokemon cards, I could like draw a little Pokemon, cut it out, use, those like laminate sheets? They're just like sticky plastic sheets, like put the little thing in there and I can make stickers. And so I like made I made some artisanal
Wow,
Pokemon
Ari.
stickers. But
Since you were
I did,
four, like nine, so fourth grade,
yeah,
9, 10.
yeah. Yeah. So I did that and I brought it in my like little box to school and I had it sorted like these are a quarter, these are 10 cents, these are a nickel. And so I like sold out all of those stickers in one day and I was so pumped about it. I had like $5 or something and I was like, oh, I just did this in one night. Like I can just keep doing this. And I got in trouble at school. I got detention for doing that. And so now when I think about that, I wish I could just go back and be like, do you see me
Yeah.
now? Like that was
Yeah.
the best skill that I developed in school. And somehow, they really tried to like stamp that out. And so that's something
Oh
that I just had that instinct and like knew to monetize these things and was able to figure out there's a certain level of demand for this. And, I understood my cost and like, would my mom buy me more like tracing paper or not? Or, all of those
oh
things.
my God. Do you have like
Um,
pictures, or did you ever keep one just as like a
I
token
think
or
there might be a couple in my mom's house. I need to go find them the next time I go home. But yeah, I had a ton of them. I like was stocking up that inventory before I got busted.
Ari, if you find them, please send them. I will pay you money just to like course correct that and affirm that. Like oh my gosh. And you just like figured it out. You're like, if I just, oh
I know, it was so funny. And my mom after was like, "Oh, you're pretty good at this." Like she was impressed too.
oh
So
my
anyway, that's like
gosh.
my like positive memory of like money and that kind of thing.
Oh, I'm
But I
so
will say like
impressed.
like that's not growing up, like that's not really the tone of most of my money memories, like because I grew up with a single mom, like my mom and her siblings also grew up pretty poor. They grew up in Waipahu and like four
Mm,
kids in a two-bedroom apartment, like Broaches, like just not a good place.
mhm.
And so, my mom being a single mom, I wasn't planned. My parents weren't together. Like I really didn't grow up with my dad at all. So most of the money memories that I have are actually a lot more around like trauma and being really stressed out about being able to like make it work or yeah, coming home to like my mom crying about bills and I
Mm,
think you absorb those things, right, as a kid, that's like that's what money
absolutely.
is. Money is the thing
Yeah.
that'll make you hurt. And so, I think through a few years of therapy, I'm I'm kind of wading out of that. And I think in some way being an entrepreneur has also, I think, helped heal that a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
in that I don't necessarily associate money with scarcity or not having enough, but now it's actually like a tool that I can use, and I can see it a little more agnostically. It doesn't have,
Yes.
it just is. It's just numbers.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, that and that part of your money story and being vulnerable. It is something that we carry our money narratives with us from, like, I still carry shit from my past, like from whatever it's like just now, I just realized, like, I was doing my Q1 numbers and looking at all the people that I had served without, like, for free, like without like pro bono or offered a service for free. And I compared it to the number of paid people, and that paid people was like significantly lower. And so I was like, oh, I'm definitely martyring. There's some martyring happening here, and something my mom did, something my Lola did. And it's just, and it comes from a place of like, they grew up in poverty. That was like that experience. And then they got out of, well, my Lola didn't make it, unfortunately, but my mom, got out of poverty. And it was like a huge guilt thing. It still is. And I see how like I absorbed that from her too, the survivor's guilt. And I love that you shared, that, money can be this tool that can be used as like a weapon or be weaponized against us. And then it can also be just a tool that's neutral or agnostic, I think was your term. And I really like that. It's here. And I think it's incredible that you even went to therapy and had that realization of like, oh, I need to commit to that part of my journey. And look at you now. Like, so before we wrap up, so you had your storefront, and now you have your design studio, and you are also an artist. Was that Pokemon sticker, was that your first official business?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, not that I had a license, but yeah, it was the first time I made money on my own.
Wow.
And yeah, I think ever since I'd been, and again, I think this is more tied to trauma than necessarily choice, but since then, I worked 2 jobs when I was in high school. When I was in undergrad, I worked 3. Like, I worked full time while I was in grad school, like always on this treadmill and trying to get to the next point and not so much enjoying it. And so now I feel like I'm not totally on the other side of it, but now I think enjoying the process is a lot more fulfilling for me. And that's kind of where I've landed. It's not about how much you suffer or how hard you hustle. It's actually about how effective you can be. And, it's your business. You get to do whatever you want.
I know. I mean, I would say if you're an entrepreneur or starting a business, if you're not making those intentions and those decisions on your own, of course, like it'll shift and change as you bring more people, but having those like foundational values and practicing what you preach as well, resting a lot, the detox from hustle culture is so real. I think that, how can we just detox overnight? It's definitely going to be a lifelong journey, but one that's so worth it. Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
Thank you for this amazing, rich conversation and for being here and sharing the space with us and with me. It was really, really an honor, and also just personally really refreshing to share the space with another entrepreneur, because like entrepreneurship can be really lonely. That's like something that I'm like shifting into. I'm like, I need more entrepreneurs in my life that understand the journey, because it can be rough. It can be really great. It could also be really rough. So yeah. How
Thank you for
can,
having me.
yeah, how can people find you? I'll have everything linked, in the description, but if you want to do
Yeah.
another plug-in.
Um, well, I have too many things going, so too many to probably like. But my main gig is Viscera Studio. That's Viscera Studio.
Mhm.
.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter. We send out lots of resources. Again, we work closely with small businesses. I'm also on Instagram at Ari Made Art for my murals and other art stuff.
Mm.
And otherwise, yeah, you can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn. I have a
Yeah.
unique name. So,
Is
yeah.
I know that you're based in Oakland, but people can work with your studio even remotely, right?
Oh, yeah, we
Okay.
have clients and yeah, outside of
Okay,
California.
cool. So clients that are watching this, it's time to let off the load that this is my advice to myself too. Like, you don't have to do everything. There's a team out
You
there that's
don't.
just ready. All right. Thank you so much,
Oh,
Ari.
oh, of course. Happy to help.
All right. Take care.
Cool.
Bye.
Bye.